I want to quote Teddy Roosevelt before we go to France. Teddy Roosevelt said, "There is no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism. When I refer to hyphenated Americans, I don't refer to naturalized Americans. Some are the very best Americans I've ever known, and they were naturalized Americans, Americans born abroad. But hyphenated American is not an American at all. The one absolutely certain, intricate knot of German Americans, Irish Americans, English Americans, French Americans, Scandinavian Americans, Italian Americans, each preserving its separate nationality, each at heart feeling more sympathy with Europeans of that nationality than with other citizens of the American Republic. There is no such thing as a hyphenated American who is a good American. The only man who is a good American is the man who decides to become an American and nothing else." I think he's absolutely right, and proof of that is what is happening in France this weekend. Ezra Levant is in France. Now, where are you, Ezra?
Hi, Glenn. I'm standing in Marseille, which is one of the largest cities in France. It's on the Mediterranean coast. It's a beautiful city, incredibly picturesque, but there are two Marseilles. There's the beautiful French part of Marseille that you would see in a postcard, but just literally a few blocks away from the tourist center, it is what I think could be fairly called a slum, with many migrants, usually from a Muslim country, particularly Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, but also Iraq, Turkey. And it's very apart. On those streets, you don't hear any French being spoken. The commerce is very different. It's a different industry, and there's a real separation. And I think that the shooting of this 17-year-old North African young man, Nahel is his name, the police, it was in a chase. The police stopped him, and they shot him. And it was shocking, and I have to say, I obviously we'll see what the facts are in the end, but I don't know if he needed to be shot. He was a 17-year-old. They knew who he was. He was stopped already. That was the spark. But that spark lit a lot of tinder that has been festering for decades. And there's a real apartness. It's almost apartheid, except for much of it is self-imposed. Here's a quick thing. I went along the cafes. There's a lot of cafes in the tourist spots here, Glenn, with out-of-towners and French people, and there's men and women, and they're dressed as you might expect in a tropical place. But you go a few blocks further into the Muslim neighborhoods, they still have cafes, but you'll notice a difference. There's no women at them. It's just men. And the odd woman you do see is wearing an abaya from head to toe. Now, there's a law in France that you cannot cover the face with a veil. They actually banned that. But COVID-19 gave a lot of folks a workaround. So you see Muslim women head to toe and then the COVID mask. I asked a lot of these folks in my broken French, I said, how do you feel being a Muslim in France? And the more assimilated ones said, we love it. We love France. We know there are racists here and there, but it's not systemically racist. I would say, is there racism back in Algeria? They said, yes. So there were some beautiful answers that were very much on point with your quote from Roosevelt. But there were other people who said, French don't respect us, French don't treat us equally. But then I said, in your heart, are you a French person first or an Algerian first? And most of them, without hesitating, said Algerian. In fact, a man and his young boy came up to me, and they wanted to say a lot about Nahel, the 17-year-old kid who was killed. And I listened to them, and I said, who are you in your heart? Are you an Algerian or are you a Frenchman? And they were so proud to say Algerian. And I was thinking, how can you be upset that the French don't welcome you fully as an equal Frenchman when you yourself refused to give up where you were, except for to come here? I said, if France is so racist, I said to some of them, why did you come here? And so I think both sides have some reconciling to do, because you have a de facto apartheid. But here's the thing, how that's going to end. Demographics. I mean, France has a declining birth rate for the ethnic French, whereas not only through continued mass immigration, but I think just through birthright, the city of Marseille will go the way the city of Malmo, Sweden has gone. It will be beautiful still. It'll still have the gorgeous sun and the port and the yachts and the cafes, but it'll be more like a Moroccan city than a French city. The world is changing, and it's because I think France and maybe America has something to say about this too, is welcoming in people who are not willing to say America is first in my heart.
You know, I agree with Teddy Roosevelt on immigrant Americans, naturalized Americans. They're some of the best Americans out there, and they're the ones who chose America. The guy I work with, who is Scottish, he's loves Scotland, and he came here, and he was thinking about citizenship. And when he went back to Scotland just recently, he said, I saw Scotland for what it really is because I now have the perspective of living in Texas and in America. And he said, I'm American. I am not Scottish. I'm American. That renews all of us. You know, that kind of guy comes in and he starts businesses and he starts to take advantage of the opportunities. And that is the big difference. I want immigrants here that are coming in and they want to be Americans. I don't want an Italian coming in and saying, I want an Italian community and we're going to have our own rules and our own ways here. No. Bring your culture with you, but become an American.
You know, Charles de Gaulle, the great French leader whose name literally means Frenchman, he was considered arrogant and he was considered many things, but and he was a France first kind of person. You remember France had colonies in North Africa. He was once asked, can a foreigner become a Frenchman? Like in his blood, can you become French? Can you join this country even if your bloodline is not French? And he said, yes. He was a chauvinist. He was arrogant. He was France first, but he said, yes. If you inculcate yourself, if you breathe in the history, the culture, you must learn the language, learn the history, learn the art. You can become a great Frenchman. And by the way, Emmanuel Macron, for all of his flaws, says much the same thing. He gave a beautiful speech 3 years ago, right in the wake of a lot of the Black Lives Matter riots in America. He gave a beautiful speech in France, swearing in some new French citizens where he talked about their rights, but he went heavy on their responsibility. You know those old French mottos, liberté, égalité, fraternité. Emmanuel Macron said you must follow those. You must fight for liberty for everyone. You must permanently struggle for liberty. He told these immigrants, he said you must follow fraternity. You must be fraternal to your new French citizen colleagues. He said you must put the republic first. He said this. Now, I do not like Emmanuel Macron at all, but it was bracing to see what he said. Alas, his deeds don't live up to his words, and it is not happening. And I fear for this is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been in, Glenn. But there is a shadow over it, and there were 1,300 people arrested in riots 2 nights ago. Average age was 17, and that's the thing. I look at the police, and I don't believe in affirmative action, but the police feel like they're an alien community. They have no ties to the community. There are very few minorities in the police. They don't speak Arabic. They have and half the time they're just defending themselves or the firemen. You know, they torch a place, the firemen go in, they attack the fire trucks. The police have to go in to escort the fire trucks out. It's almost like, some of these dystopian movies like Blade Runner or something where the police are this foreign, hated, alien, disconnected force, and they're going to lose just from pure demographics. You know, the Bobbies in Britain. So Robert.
Sorry to interrupt, but that was the secret of American police in New York. The Irish guy who had become an American, he was the guy who patrolled his own neighborhood. The Italian guy, he patrolled his own neighborhood. And so they weren't a foreign force. The problem with this is that, at least in New York, the New Yorkers cannot afford to live in most of those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
The police can't.
Yeah.
So they are a foreign, they're not part of the community anymore. And you can't have people who swear allegiance first to Algeria being the cop for France.
Well, that's the thing. Does your oath mean something? Now, by the way, one of the answers I got was, I said, are you Algerian first or are you French first? You said, Allah first, and I believe in the Ummah. And you know what? In some ways, that's like a Christian who would say, I put Jesus first. And I respect that. But as the Bible says, render unto Caesar what's Caesar. So yes, in your heart, your conscience, your morality, if you want to put Allah first, I get it. Because if a Christian said, I put Jesus first, I would respect that. I wouldn't say you're a bad American. But in matters secular, in matters of civil law and order, in matters of police and learning the language, you have to put Caesar first, or in this case, put the Republic first.
And isn't that what an Ummah means? The opposite of that? Doesn't an Ummah kind of suggest a caliphate kind of...
A global, government of sorts. And, by the way, he later ran up
the church
and demanded... Yes, that's right. It's very different. So, listen, this is a beautiful city, but terrible things are happening, and it's spreading. It's spreading to Belgium. It's spreading to Switzerland. Why is that? It's an ethnic solidarity, and I think that massive, unabsorbed, unintegrated immigration, in this case from Islam, is going to be a problem no matter what. De Gaulle insisted on absorption, assimilation, integration. He said, yes, you can become French. I asked some of these guys, I said, Barack Obama became a black president. Rishi Sunak is a South Asian prime minister of the UK. I said, could you imagine a Muslim president of France? And most of them said no. And maybe that's a problem too. If you can't imagine yourself having full access to the corridors of business and political and cultural life, I guess
Correct.
You do ghettoize yourself. But it's a two-sided problem, Glenn. I don't know. It's very sad. I came here not knowing what to expect, and I leave with a feeling of fatalism that between demographics, open border immigration, and political correctness, all of these trends will get worse over time, not better. And I think that there's a whole new level of violence we saw this last week that I mean, listen, there's always riots in France. It's a national pastime. But this felt especially ethnic in its character.
Well, I will tell you, the Norwegian countries are facing the same. I was just over I love those French police cars. They sound like toys. But I was just over in England and Scotland and Ireland. Ireland is almost entirely gone because of the rapid immigration without assimilation. It is the world and Europe is completely changing and won't be the same in 20 years. Thank you so much, Ezra. Have a safe trip back to Canada. We thank you for everything that you guys do up in Canada.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You bet.
Thank you, Glenn. Bye-bye.
You bet. All right. That is Ezra Levant. He is a host of the Ezra Levant Show, and he is Rebel News, the founder of Rebel News up in Canada. Canada is another one that one is really getting spooky. To me, Canada is more spooky than even France is, because this is people that you think you understand and think are regular Canadians, and they are not. I mean, they're not. Well, they're Canadians, but I don't understand how they're coming to the conclusion that, if you're a kid and you're depressed, the state should be able to recommend suicide to you. It's insanity what's going on in Canada.